Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat podcast. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you are joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today I am speaking with Siska D'hoore, who is the head of HR at the National Bank of Belgium, where she leads human resources strategy and initiatives. She also oversees talent management, learning and development programs, DEI, and workforce planning for the organization, which includes a hybrid work arrangement in a multilingual environment, which we'll get into. Siska has over 20 years of experience across various sectors, including IT, banking, government, and has worked on 3 continents and is passionate about creating comprehensive diversity and inclusion initiatives that go beyond gender considerations. Siska, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy. Very nice to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. You and I chatted a few weeks back, and I was really fascinated with some of the things that you're doing in the world of HR and talent development, especially with the hybrid approach that your bank is taking, and how you deal with the regulatory aspects of that, as well as the different cultures and languages that come along. I've been to Belgium once, and of course, aware of the culture there. It's very interesting being, such a small country with so many different cultures coming together, and different languages as well. So I'm excited to dig into that. But before we do, I always like to start with a bit of background to find out, how did you get into HR or talent development in the first place?
Well, it's a long story. How did I get into HR? Because I'm not an HR person by education, so I'm an engineer by education. I
Hmm.
started my career, as you mentioned, in the IT sector. So in the pre-sales department, in fact, where I grew to be a consultant, project manager, and so on. And well, my job was not a pure technical one. I was also looking into organizational design, like for service desks or IT support, also giving training to employees about processes. Working from time to time also on projects where you had TUPE, so you had staff transfer from the customer to the provider and so on. And gradually my interest in HR grew. And at one point in time, I was also managing a team of 20 consultants, where we spent a lot of time together with HR on employer branding, career management, career progression, talent development programs, you name it. And so at one point in time, I jokingly said to my HR colleague, well, if ever there's a place in your team, let's talk, because HR really looks like a very interesting job field for me. And yeah, time passes and so on. And I was at that point part of the management board at the company I worked for. And then the HR director at one point in time said, well, I'm leaving. Wouldn't you be interested in taking my job? And I
Huh.
said, well, let's think about it. And well, after a bit of thought, I thought, why not? I always like to be working with HR, and it would be interesting to step over that frontier and actually be in HR. And so, of course, yeah, I followed some training aspects more on the hard side of HR, on comp and ben and dealing with unions and stuff like that. But it's been now, I think, 14 years since I made that
Hmm.
move, and I haven't regretted it for one single second, to be honest.
That's so great to hear. I love stories like that. And as someone who is a big fan of, we'll say, owning your career, following your dreams, as well as embracing a growth mindset and trying things, even if you haven't really done them before, you're not sure how you're going to do. I can imagine that being a bit of a scary moment to go from, oh, I'd like to try working in HR to the HR director saying, well, I'm leaving. Why don't you just take my job? And
Yeah.
wondering if you can do it okay. I'm curious, what did that feel like in the moment? And did you have any fear or imposter syndrome that you had to overcome, or did you just kind of jump into it?
Well, I kind of jumped into it, but I knew that I had a team that was small but experienced, that there were 2 persons doing everything, compensation and benefits, which really knew comp and ben from A to Z. So that for me was already some comfort, because I think if the team would have been more junior, or if more was expected of me on the comp and ben side, the decision would have been more scary. And on the union side, well, we did have our time with the unions, I can say. So the company was facing a bit of a turmoil. We had quickly already a big restructuring to do. So I really learned it the hard way by
Mm.
doing. But again, there I also had a business partner that was very supportive. And for me, the advantage was that I worked in the company already 10 years before taking that
Mm.
leap to HR. I think that gave me also a bit of street credibility, and I knew almost everybody, also the people from the unions and so on. So that really helped a lot. I think if you would do
Yeah.
that move while switching companies, it's very hard to do.
More difficult, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mentioned in the intro you've also worked on three continents, so I know you're in
yeah.
Belgium. Where else have you worked?
Yeah, so I was also responsible for HR in India and APAC, and then also for HR in Latin America. So yeah, that
Okay.
was while I was with that IT company. Yes.
Right. Okay. So traveling and working with people in those different areas across different cultures, always a challenge. Have there been any important realizations or aha moments along the way about working with people from different cultures in HR?
Yeah, for me it was you immediately saw the difference when you were able to meet face to face. Really, that made a huge difference. So, for example, when I was spending a week in India, traveling to the different sites that we had across, because India it's almost a continent by itself. Across the different cities in India, and you really saw the office. You really went out to lunch with the colleagues. They tried to explain you what they eat on a daily basis, and trying to discover whether you like it very spicy or not so spicy. It just really gives a nice flavor, and afterwards. The collaboration is so much smoother. And also in Europe, for example, we had some sites that were a bit far off, difficult to reach in Romania.
Hmm.
That I took the effort as an HR responsible to really go there. It took me, I think, a day to arrive there and a day coming back to spend a day on site. But that I took the effort to travel that far for them to meet with them face to face was very much appreciated.
Hmm.
And of course, sometimes there were budget cuts and you couldn't travel and you couldn't meet the persons, but you felt it immediately in the collaboration. That was, although everybody tried their best, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And
No,
for
no
me, that
doubt.
was really an eye opener.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. It's so important to get that time together if you can to understand people where they're coming from so that you can communicate more effectively. So give us a sense of what the situation is that you work in now, the organization and the people you oversee as kind of context. And then I want to get into the hybrid and RTO mandates that you and I discussed previously, because I think this would be interesting for a lot of people in the HR space thinking about that are in different places with regards to the, return to office or hybrid or remote work.
Mhm. No, sure. So here I'm responsible for HR at the National Bank of Belgium. So we're the central bank of Belgium, like the ECB is overseeing the whole of Europe, or the Federal Reserve is doing the same in the States. So we're based here in Brussels, a small 2,000 employees in two locations in Brussels. So we have our main office, and then we also have our cash facilities where we deal with the cash handling.
Mm,
Our tasks are very broad. That goes from economic research, predictions on inflation, all kinds of studies, to gathering data to make statistics, to doing supervision on the financial system, so the banks and the insurers, to avoid a bit financial crises happening again.
mm,
And of course, we also have a broad support department going from IT to facilities, HR, and things like that. So as you mentioned in the intro, indeed, Belgium, it's a small country, but I always say we're very, very complex or
mhm.
interesting, if you may say so as well.
Yeah.
So we have three languages in the country. So we have Dutch, French, and German. And on the daily working floor, we mix French and Dutch the whole time, in fact. So.
Interesting. And was everybody in the office before the pandemic? And I imagine then you had remote for a while, and now I think you're at like a 50-50 mix. Tell us about
Yeah.
the RTO approach.
Yeah, so before the pandemic, in fact, we were doing some experiments with teleworking, but in our context, it was not really broadly done. So we had some tests in the IT department. They worked 1 to 2 days a week from home. Some other departments worked 1 day a week from home, but for a lot of us, it was just not possible. For example, we also have a big financial markets department, and for security reasons, they couldn't work from home at all.
Mm.
So let's say that some of us experience 1 day a week, but even though if your department allowed it, a lot of the colleagues just didn't ever work 1 single day from home in their professional lives before the pandemic. And then, yeah, of course, the pandemic hit us as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
We were forced to work from home, apart from the cash handling that always remains available with some reduced working hours and smaller teams to be on the safe side, and some colleagues from facilities, but everybody else just went working from home. And in fact, it was funny because we didn't have much experience with technologies like Teams and things like that. But that transition from full-time office to full-time working from home went very smooth.
Mm.
Our IT colleagues were very supportive, so that was superb. Everybody already had a laptop. Screens were delivered at home, or even if you wanted a keyboard or a mouse, that was no problem. We just sent it to your house. And then, yeah, exiting the pandemic, we thought, okay, what are we going to do now? Where we come from this one, you work in the office nearly 100%, where we experienced home working 100%. And we saw a lot of institutions in the financial sector saying, okay, we're going to go back to the office like 1 day a week. That should be enough. But we were like, oof, is this really enough? Well, it's our nature to be on the safe side of things. So we thought, okay, let's be on the safe side. Let's say, okay, and let's try 50-50 for a while and then do a big evaluation and see if we need to tune it up or tune it down. So that's what we did when we exited the pandemic. We said, okay, let's work 50-50 for a year and then do a big evaluation. We used the Leesman survey for that matter. And in fact, what we found out quite some interesting facts. The one fact was, for example, that although we assumed everybody had a nice desk separately in their home,
Yeah.
like you probably have, if I can see it from behind you, that was not true for a lot of colleagues. So typically, the colleagues whose kids left the house redecorated the kids' room and made their office, but the younger ones were still co-housing together, maybe with friends, and didn't have a separate office. The ones that had children worked on the kitchen counter and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was already a big discovery for us. And then also you saw that, yeah, people did appreciate the office time, managers as well. And basically they found that, okay, the 50-50, it's doable with a bit of flexibility. And in the end, that's what we decided. So we said, okay, you work maximum 50% from home, at minimum 50% in the office. You can work full-time in the office if you want to as well, or if there's a big construction site next door or whatever, like now it's holiday period in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see some people with teenagers at home that they say, okay, the teenagers are at home, but I'm like to work in the office because at least then it's quiet and my kids don't disturb me. Okay, equally
Right.
fine. So we see, and it's nice that we can offer that flexibility. And yeah, and if you look at the RTO discussion currently in Belgium, and I think in the States and in a lot of countries as well, you see that a lot of companies where the pendulum has swung to, I don't know, nearly 100%
Right.
teleworking, they're now swinging the other way around to getting everybody full-time back in the office. I think it's from the one extreme to the other, honestly.
Right.
But we see that a lot of companies that say, okay, you can only need to be in the office like 1 day a week. They realize now 1 day a week it's too little. It
Yeah.
needs to be more, but that's difficult, getting people in the office more.
Right. And I would imagine it's interesting that you went out and surveyed people to find out what their situations were. The thing is, we all know there's no one size fits all, as they
No.
say, right? And I would imagine, like you said, there's going to be younger employees who live in a small place, who value the socializing, who want to be in the office most of the time. And then you have people with families that don't want to commute and maybe want to be home more. So it sounds like the 50-50, it's for everyone, but there's a lot of flexibility in how you approach it so that you can accommodate people's situations.
Yeah, that's a bit of the idea. And we have the minimum office presence of 50%, where we also say it's also not per se you need to think for your situation a bit egocentrically, but you also need to look at the colleagues because we're
Mm.
onboarding an awful lot of colleagues. It's like almost 10% every year. And how do you want new colleagues to be trained, to be taught, to get to know the culture if there's nobody around to help them, to teach them, to mentor them. And that's also something that's we're raising a lot of awareness around it. That's if there are new people in the team, they are not to be left alone on an office day when they come. We also stimulate that teams have their team day, and they can decide themselves if it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, or once a month, or whatever, but that there is a team day, that they know that everybody comes to the office on that day and we see each other and we can have lunch together or whatever. And that's important also, this social cohesion, or this water cooler moments. It's before COVID, this was all very spontaneously, but now you really need to think about
right. You got to be
organizing that.
intentional as a manager or leader and setting that up and making sure people are there at least once every couple of weeks all together on the same day so they can collaborate and get to know each other, which we know is really important as well, not just working together, but by getting to know each other so they can trust each other. You mentioned, go ahead.
I was just confirming, absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned onboarding in there. I remember last time we spoke, you mentioned NBB's extensive onboarding program. And, when you're onboarding 10% a year, that's pretty significant. And obviously, with people having all kinds of different schedules, you don't want to do the classic, just give somebody a laptop and tell them to figure it out. So I know a lot of companies are revamping and trying to improve their onboarding programs these days. So what did you find, and how did you start the process to build a really great onboarding program?
Yeah, so what we do is really a very warm and extensive welcome. So we onboard new colleagues throughout the year. It's always either on the first of the month, or the first working day of the month, or the 16th, around that period, so that we always have a small group of colleagues, and they're welcomed by HR. They get a tour of the office, with practical stuff and things like that. And by lunchtime, the manager and the colleagues can come pick them up to show them their desk, and also to have lunch with them together. And then onboarding in the business starts. We ask also beforehand that the business assigns, we call it a godfather or a godmother. And so it's really basically like a kind of mentor function. So they have one go-to person in the team who's not the manager, to ask all kind of, what people could say, this is a silly question, I don't want to ask it to my manager. But there are no silly questions, but they can ask it to their colleague, who's there to answer all this kind of stuff. And then they have, in fact, an onboarding program on two tracks. So one is the track that they follow in their business for the technical skills, the business skills they need to know to do their job. And that can be learning by a colleague, that can be formal training. The bigger departments also have their own online training modules that they have. Sometimes it's just like we're doing it, one colleague explaining something to the other, and they just record it because they know that there will be more colleagues joining, and then they have to explain it just once, and then the other colleagues can watch the video. And then we have the very extensive onboarding program that we have from HR. So every new colleague has 2 years of time to complete that program, and it's a mix of mandatory modules like on compliance, on safety, these kind of stuff, and more optional modules, but highly recommended ones. So we have, for example, the opportunity that we give to all new employees to have like a kind of team building in small groups with other new colleagues offsite, and it's based around our values and communication techniques. And this is really one training that I have not seen one single person not enthusiastic about that one. And it's also creating, like, you're together in a group of 10 colleagues, and this is creating like bonds for life. So it's a mix with people from different departments, and you see that these small groups are still having lunch 10 years after they have onboarded, for example. And that's really also one of the very important goals that we have. So we're a big organization, and we want you not only to feel part of the team, but also part of the organization. So every time we do something, we have the serious stuff, but we do like a lunch or a reception or something small around it to allow people to network and to meet with colleagues from other departments. And then we also have our own TED Talks that we set up since last year. So because we're such a large organization with really different fields and functions, we have asked every department to present themselves in 20 minutes, like the TED Talks,
Mm,
for the new colleagues. And this is also very much appreciated because everybody likes to know not only what their team is doing, but also understand a bit what the wider organization is doing. And we kind of do it in a lighter way than sitting a whole day listening to our presentations, things like that. So
right.
yeah.
And how do you, as you're bringing people together and you're also bringing in speakers, how do you how do you manage the different languages with all of that? I mean, I know you said that you have people working in different languages. I would imagine French is the primary, but no, it's not. Okay,
No,
shaking
no,
your
no,
head.
no,
I
no,
was
no, no,
wrong.
no. By law, in fact, yeah, this is then typically Belgium. So we have language laws that regulate public functions in Belgium, and we're not. Well, it's a bit complex here. So we're not part of the government, but we're a public function, and so we have to comply with these language laws that imply, in fact, that our employee population, well, basically needs to be 50-50 French speaking and Dutch speaking. So on any given working day, and yeah, we talk everything together, in fact. So of course, when we give a formal presentation, you have different options. So either I'm officially bilingual, for example. So what I typically do is I have my slides in Dutch and I will speak French, or vice versa. Or I have one half of my presentation in Dutch and the other half in French. How we accommodate new colleagues, because we do expect that you at least understand the other language well enough to follow a conversation or to
Okay.
listen into a meeting. And you don't have to speak it fluently, but at least you have to listen
Okay.
and be
So
able to read and understand it.
if I could interpret that, you may
Yeah.
come from an area that is primarily French speaking, and you don't have to be fluent in speaking Dutch, but you need to be understand enough that you can read something and listen to a presentation and pretty much understand it, or the other way around. So you want people that are
Yeah.
at least semi-bilingual in both of those languages. I would imagine English being very helpful as well, being the international sort of languages business,
Yeah,
or is
but
that not?
English is mostly used in our IT department, and of course, when we talk to international colleagues throughout
Mm,
the Eurosystem and the ECB and things like that,
okay.
but it's not our daily working language, which is different to when I worked in the IT sector. There, English was very much our written language, but as people in Belgium often say, English is not our official language, so
Right.
it doesn't have an official tenure, let's say. But then for new people, we do realize that they are not equally understanding as much the other language. So there we often offer live translation facilities when we have big events, for example. That's also an option that we have. And we
Mm,
do have our own small language institutes within the organization. So we offer also extensive Dutch and French courses, as well as German and English, for the employees that want to improve their language skills. So that's
okay,
something.
wow. Okay, so you're also there providing learning opportunities to help people improve their
Yeah.
language skills in different
Yeah.
languages, which I'd imagine would be valuable. It's always probably surprising for a lot of people from the US, like where I'm from, that you would need to learn two, three different languages to conduct business, right? But such is the way when you live in a place that's sort of at the intersection of so many different cultures.
Yeah, no, for us it's really more, it makes more sense, but still, even, I mean, normally you learn you learn at least three languages at school. When you're in high school, you, as a Dutch speaker, you learn French, you learn English, and a lot of us also have some German or Spanish or whatever.
Mhm.
But then between having it in school and realizing that the other language is also important when you want to
Mm,
do business, that's sometimes a different story, of course. And it's
right.
also depending a bit which type of organization you work for. Like my husband works in the semiconductor industry, there it's all English. I mean,
Mm.
he never, almost never speaks Dutch or French. So,
Interesting. And how many languages do you speak?
me, well, fluently, let's say four, and less fluently, another four.
And less
So,
fluently, another four.
eight.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. I'd love to get into those, but I want to stick with, of course, HR and talent development. You mentioned being half government, half private. I'm curious, what are some of
Yeah.
the implications of that as you are managing talent and HR for the organization?
Yeah, so Well, so our pay system, for example, this is something that we can design ourselves. So we have our own pay system, so that's not linked whatsoever to the government. So that's a good thing. What we do have when we talk about talent and talent development is this whole language thing I just talked about.
Mm,
So it's something we need to keep in mind. Yeah, we would, it's an additional DNI layer you can add to the language thing. And then, of course, there's the whole thing on public procurement. So in Belgium and in Europe, there are public procurement regulations and laws that we need to abide by. And that is, yeah, and there we lean more to how the government is doing things. So, and also in HR, yeah, if you want to have a new training or hire a headhunter, look for a new HR system, IT system. You each time need to make a tender, have it published somewhere on the internet, and then do the whole tendering process to have a good partner selected. So that's
right.
taking more time than it would in the private sector.
Mm. We talked earlier about onboarding. You said you're onboarding about 10% of the population per year. I'm curious if the organization is growing at all, or is that more about replacing retiring workers? Because I remember you mentioned to me before that you're also going through a bit of a workforce transition with 40% of the organization retiring in the next few years. Is that still true?
Yeah, so indeed, so we had, well, we were a bit on the top of our retirement boom, and so hence also the recruitment boom. And so indeed, most of our recruitment is due to people retiring that we're replacing. Of course, we're not replacing one by one, so we're also taking advantage of this retirement boom to look into our processes, to automate further, to also look into what are the essentials we're doing. Some functions like cleaning facilities and so on are more and more outsourced to the point that today they're outsourced completely. And so you see that in yeah, some areas we're expanding in headcount and others are, well, or have been reduced. For example, 6 years ago, we still printed euro banknotes here in Belgium. Now we completely stopped printing banknotes, and we're working together with Austria and Portugal to print banknotes for us, for
Mm.
example.
Okay. So no more printing big notes there. So you can't just walk
Uh,
down and grab the cash that you need for lunch. You got to you wait for someone else to print that for you, right? Uh,
no, we still do the cash handling. That we still do, but
oh, you still have a lot of cash there, right? I would imagine there's a lot of
yeah, we
regulation
still have a
around
lot
that.
of cash.
I would imagine there's a lot of regulation around that cash handling. You can't just grab
Yeah,
some.
no, sure, and it's not no longer here in this building. It's in a brand new cash facilities on the outskirts of Brussels, so very
Okay.
very securely protected.
One of the topics that is really top of mind for a lot of talent development professionals around the world these days is leadership development and how to develop leaders to help guide people in the organization into the future, as well as through all the change that's going on. I'm curious how you approach leadership development, especially addressing having a multilingual environment as well.
Yes, so there we have in fact three levels of programs. So the first one is for people that are interested in becoming a leader, a manager at some point in their career. That's, we call it Ambition to Lead. This is more like a bit of a course that gives an overview. Okay, what is typically that we expect from a manager, from a leader in our organization? Because what we often also see is that, well, people think, hey, I want to progress in my career, so I will become a manager. But of course, this is not the only way to progress in an organization, certainly not in an expert organization as we have. And it's sometimes people follow that training to say, okay, but in the end, that function, it sounded nice, but it's not something for me. And that's equally good friends. I mean, that's also one of the purposes of the training, that to discover that the job of being a manager, being a leader is really something you want to do. And then we have the program for people starting in a leadership role. We call that Start to Lead. And then they really get so through the employee life cycle about performance management, how can I coach employees, how can I support people that having difficulties and so on. But also some more harder skills like budgeting and stuff that is also expected from them. So that's the whole program where we are in the progress of develop. Well, we have already a big chunk of modules, but we're in the process of developing more now. And then lastly, we have our program for more experienced managers, and that's where we have each year, like we call it a senior leadership day around a certain team, where we work together. We have some speakers, we have some training sessions, some workshops with them. And then we also have an informal learning network, which is like a peer support network, where a group of senior managers is bringing subjects to the table, and they work around it in smaller groups, and they do that. So that's a bit the three levels that we have.
Okay. And when you bring leaders in, when you run these programs, do they need to be also multilingual in both French and Dutch?
Yes, but again, it's a mix. So like the last leadership day that we had two speakers. One was French speaking, the other one was Dutch speaking, for
Okay.
example. So, and for sure, when we're talking about senior leaders, we expect, and even even more junior leaders, we expect that they're able to have one-to-one conversations in the language of the employee. So they need to be bilingual.
Right.
And if they're not bilingual, then we will give them again training that they will be at the end.
To help them.
So because
Wow.
that's a bit the unspoken rule that we have is that, yeah, as a manager, like performance evaluations, development conversations, you have them in the language of the employee.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this seems like a very inclusive approach, if you will. And I wanted to ask you also about your approach to D&I initiatives, because I know that's something you're very passionate about, D&I beyond gender. So just curious what that looks like and how you make sure your programs are inclusive at the National Bank of Belgium.
Yeah, so indeed, well, when we started with DNI, I think it was almost 10 years ago, we focused on gender because there we noticed that as you went up into the hierarchy, the number of women just went increasingly down. So we invested quite a lot in women development programs, getting women up to senior management as well. But then also we thought, okay, we should not limit it to gender alone. There's so much other types of diversity. So what we also did was, together with our the colleagues from health and well-being, we also looked at people with disabilities. What can we do about it? And it's not per se the visible disabilities, but also the invisible disabilities, neurodiversity, and so on. So we also did some work around that, which is less easy than gender, because gender it's quite easy to measure. I mean, it's on your ID card and so
Right.
on. But disabilities is not per se on your ID card, and
Mm,
people don't. Not everybody wants to disclose it either, so it's a
right.
confidential information. So it's a bit more complicated. But it was very much appreciated by our employees as well. We also had a few people doing a testimonial in our auditorium and things like that. So that was very nice. I don't know if you hear the police.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I will maybe shut up for a while
Yeah.
until it's gone.
Give it a second. The Belgian authorities. Okay.
Yes, they're gone. Yeah, that's a disadvantage of being the center of Brussels. That from time to time you hear that. But anyways, and then what we also did was looking into the whole LGBTQI plus spectrum, how we could support colleagues in that way. So that's also a network that was set up, the Open at Work network. And since this year, for the first time, we participated to both the Pride here in Brussels, and also together with the colleagues from ECB, we also participated to the Pride in Frankfurt. So that was also
Mm,
a nice experience for the colleagues involved in the organization of these two events, to be able to work as bank employees there. So it's also very nice. And then lastly, since last year, we also started to work on generational diversity.
mm,
And with that, it's amazing that everybody feels one way or another involved. And it's, I think, the one DNI angle that is not controversial at all. Because sometimes when you talk about gender, then people say, okay, you're doing a lot to stimulate the women, but what about the men? We're feeling left behind, and so on. But here on Generations, everybody feels involved, and it was very nice to see that earlier this year, we worked together with a DNI network in the finance sector, which is called Women in Finance. And they had each March, they do an inclusive March challenge. And this year it was also about generations. So we teamed up and we had, I think, 10 teams from the bank doing this inclusive March challenge around generations, and really very much, yeah, if you read the testimonials and talk to the colleagues, everybody kind of felt, this is nice to be able to talk about the topic. And it's, yeah, some biases we had about the younger or the older, they fell through, and it's nice to have just an open conversation about that topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Very interesting. Okay, so making sure you are inclusive and addressing all of these different situations. I wanted to ask you as well, Siska, about career development, and curious what the approach is to making sure people understand what opportunities are available to them once they're in the organization.
Yeah, so there, well, we internal mobility we really value highly. So we have the rule that all our vacancies are first published internally on our intranet. And in fact, on our intranet, if you open the first page, you see immediately the list of vacancies, and you also see the external vacancies, so that if you would have missed something, you can also apply as an internal person to an external vacancy. But we want to do more on that aspect as well, because we realize, okay, there's this internal mobility, but then actually you have to change jobs. We would like to also have something like a project marketplace in place, where if people say, okay, I want to do something for a shorter term, a project in another business area, for example, that you could do that as well. We have that possibility internationally already. So each year in September, there is an internal marketplace which is called Schumann, which is opening up for people that are working in central banks. And like, for example, this year, September, we will accommodate a colleague from the Dutch Central Bank here in HR that will work on topics on change management and communication. And there are people from organizations that go to other countries or to the ECB to do a project as well. It's very nice, but it's, for me, it's we have this internationally, but I also would like to have it locally, in fact.
So that people get experience doing different things around the office
Yeah.
there and can grow their range of experience essentially on their careers.
Yeah, and it's very much valuable that you, well, some people just want to have like well, kind of an experience in another department with the guarantee that they can come back to their job afterwards. So they say, I just want to do something different for 6 months, but I'm happy where I am, but just to have another experience.
Mhm.
So that would really help, I think. But yeah, still some work in progress.
Siska, last question. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but the other topic, of course, that's hot across all organizations is AI and how are you using AI and artificial intelligence. Just curious how, if at all, you are starting to incorporate AI into what you do in HR and talent development.
Well, in HR and talent development, it's quite limited for the moment. So we use an AI to create e-learnings. I think it's called Synthesia, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the one use we currently have. Well, for two reasons, it's fairly limited at the moment. First, because as a central bank, we're a very prudent organization, so we really don't want to create too much risks by introducing AI in areas where we don't feel comfortable with. And secondly, and most importantly, is that we're completely revamping our HRIT landscape as we speak. So we first want to have that implementation going on, and then I think as we move forward, we will have better opportunities integrated also and embedded within the software that we will use to check at AI possibilities as well. But also in Europe, you have the AI Act, so there's a lot of things you cannot do.
Right.
And in our organization, we're quite strict on, we can use AI, so we have co-pilots and we can use ChatGPT, but only for data that is not confidential. And
Right.
so we can use co-pilots integrated in the Office suite, but to a certain extent.
Well, Siska, thank you for sharing that and for joining us today. There's so many more things I'd love to ask, but we're out of time for now. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all that you did about the work that you've been doing there at the National Bank of Belgium and how you coordinate the different cultures and languages and build inclusive programs and give opportunities to leaders. Really wonderful to hear all of that, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and talking more in the future.
Thank you. My pleasure, Andy. Bye bye.
Mm.